Good afternoon to all of you. I know you are joining from different time zones, so that's a good thing to hear from this panel. We will begin shortly, so we'll just give maybe 1 minute for all of you to enter the Zoom call. Look like indeed we have people from all over the world. Those are very big news, especially for our distinguished guests that are with us today. Okay, I think we can start now. So again, please be welcome to this session, to this webinar, Mitigating Corruption Risks to Your Business. In this occasion, we will be having a very interesting agenda with special guests from a lot of countries. Please be advised that we have made available interpretation services for this session. We will display shortly the instructions for you to know how to get there, so how to listen to the conversations in some other languages apart from English. So we will display that instruction very shortly here. There you go. Thank you so much. So it will be possible for you to get translation to Spanish, French, and Portuguese as well. So that is one of the important perks of this session today. It is important for us not only to bring special guests to the session, which is of course one of the main purposes of these events, of these sessions, but also to get you involved, to get your inputs, to get actually your comments, your questions for us to answer. We will do our best to answer them throughout the chat, throughout the conversation. So please feel free to put them in the chat of the Zoom call. We will also have a Q&A section later in this session, so that it's very important for you to know in this event. This event is important also to remind you that this is the third session on these webinars on business integrity. This one is referred to mitigating corruption risks to your business, but remember the last one was about actually assessing corruption risks. So of course we are following kind of a logic line in this session. We now want to know firsthand from not only from a theoretical perspective of the concepts around mitigating corruption risk, but also from very particular examples from companies and businesses that are actually working very hard on this matter. So that's basically like the objective and the thematic area of this event. So please be welcome to it. This event is all organized by the United Nations Global Compact and the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. So this is jointly organized, and we are pleased to have you today in this event. Today's agenda is as follows. First, we will have an introduction, a very brief introduction with some general remarks, especially from myself and some of the guests. We will have a technical presentation from one of our experts that I will be introducing shortly. And after that, we will have a panel, a conversation with some company examples, with some representatives of private companies that will share with us testimonies, and they will share with us their answers to some questions that we have prepared for them. So as you can see, we have prepared like a twofold approach. We will have a technical perspective, more theoretical or conceptual perspective, and we will also have examples, very practical examples from companies that actually are implementing anti-corruption programs, that are actually implementing some measures to mitigate their corruption risk. So that's basically how we will proceed during this session. Okay, first of all, I would like to give some very quick remarks about Dr. Fabián Espejo, who is the person in charge of the first part of the presentation. Fabián is a Colombian lawyer. He is PhD in politics from Queen's University Belfast, his master in business studies from the University of Ulster, and LLM in international law from London Metropolitan University. Before giving you the word, Fabián, we will have also a space for you to interact with us, to share some of your opinions, especially using the Mentimeter app, which of course, I mean, you surely will be familiarized with it. So our team will switch to the Mentimeter platform so that you can actually engage in the discussion with us, so that we can actually get your impressions from some questions that we have just prepared for you. So we will be displaying shortly the link so that you can access the platform for the Mentimeter, the app, I mean, and you can share with us your comments and your impressions on some questions that we have just prepared for you. Okay, so we are now displaying the Mentimeter application. You have the code that you can actually access to get into the platform. And please let us know, what is the biggest challenge to defining and developing policies and programs for business integrity for small and medium businesses? We would like to know your opinions on these questions. We will be displaying this in real time so that we can have your participation on the platform. We have already received some of your answers. You can see how it goes in real time. As the main options, we have defined low capital, complicated procedures, lack of information on the subject matter, and some other considerations. This is, of course, about the challenges, and the biggest challenge to defining and developing those policies that actually we will be addressing throughout the space of today. Okay, so we think we might have one winner, which is about complicated procedures. That's very interesting regarding all the different protocols and processes that we have within the companies. We will give just a couple of seconds more so that you can participate on this question. And after that, we will get to the next one, just maybe a couple more. Okay, yeah, I think we have a winner here about complicated procedures, of course, that we will take note about that. Maybe we can move to the next one, please. Okay, well, I think that we have, okay, that's the one. That one, perfect. Now we want to know about, how do you think, how effective is your company in communicating its anti-corruption policies and expectations to employees? And that is a very important question indeed, because it is not only about having robust and quite and clear defined policies for your companies, but also to know how to communicate those policies to the teams, to the collaborators, and to the employees in general. So we are now receiving your answers again for this matter. I think we have a moderated opinion on this one. Not a lot of people said great, which is good. I mean, it's good to acknowledge how we can improve in these strategies of communication. Actually, some of the examples that some of the companies that we have here, they know a lot about communication strategies. So that will be also a very important topic that we will be addressing throughout the session. Most of you just say it's okay. It needs improving, it needs a lot of attention as well. And some of you also recognize that it might be poor. So it's also a very important thing to note in this conversation, in this panel, that, I mean, we need to work on that front. We need to know how to communicate the policies that we are developing. We might have the best policies in the region, but if we do not communicate those policies correctly, it will be very hard for the company, for the employees to actually get to know how the company works, how to prevent and how to mitigate the risk, which at the end is the main purpose of this webinar of today. So I think that as it was the case with the last question, we also have a winner here, which is okay. So we think we are okay with the communicating experience of the anti-corruption policy. So please move to the next one. Thank you very much. There's one more and we'll move on with the presentation. Okay, do you know about the existing anti-corruption policies and strategies in your company? And of course, this question is closely linked to the other one that we were just taking note before. Because if we do have good strategy communications, we will know the policy that we have in the company, but if it doesn't work, then this part will get a little bit more difficult. Most of you know about the existing anti-corruption policy. We will just give a couple of seconds more for this part. I mean, of course, we do not want to spend too much time on this part, but we wanted to engage you in this conversation. As I mentioned before, the idea of this is that we not only provide you with very interesting contents, but that we also get feedback from you, that we also get your attention and your opinions on some key areas of the thematical areas related to these webinars. Okay, so for this part, I think we also have a clear winner, which is yes. And most of you know the existing anti-corruption policies. There might be another question, not for this time, about how you interiorize those policies, about how you apply those policies. I mean, you might know the policies, but it's a different thing to actually know how to implement and how to interiorize those policies in your daily life, in your organization. Okay, so I think that we have it from now. I think we can continue with our agenda for today. And for that matter, I will give the word to Dr. Fabian. So if you could please complement your introduction and please, of course, go ahead with your presentation. We will really appreciate it, Dr. Fabian. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. I think that your presentation was good enough and I don't want to spend more time in my introduction. So I'm going to start with the presentation, and which is related to defining and developing anti-corruption policies and strategies in your company. It's important. Okay, let's begin by saying that this presentation is part of the UN Global Compact Management Model, as it involves several steps. It's a process which involves several steps. The first one is commit, the second one is assess, which, as mentioned Sebastian, assess was the last presentation. And today we are going to be focused on define, which is the third step of the UN Global Compact Management Model. So as we are going to refer to the third step, which is define, we are going to be focused on refining goals, potential actions, and priorities. So first of all, it's important to say that the company should develop a roadmap to carry out its anti-corruption program. The anti-corruption program involves policies and procedures that aims at addressing corruption risks, pursuing opportunities, reducing and mitigating negative impacts, and enhancing positive impacts. So let's me turn now to the main features of an anti-corruption ethics and compliance program to be effective, efficient, and sustainable. The three main objectives of an anti-corruption program is to be effective, efficient, and sustainable. So one of the main features is the consistency with all applicable laws. As you know, many companies operate in different countries with multiple jurisdictions, with different legal systems. So it's important to try to adopt a global anti-corruption standard in the anti-corruption program in order to be coherent and in order to the company be able to perform in a similar way in all the countries in which it performs. Secondly, it's important to adapt the program to specific requirements. So it should be adapted to the individual nature of the company, organizational culture, preference, or customs. It's also important to promote the participation of the stakeholders. A participatory approach in the implementation and ongoing improvement of the program is important as it reduces objections or resistance to the program. So it's, as I'm going to mention during my presentation, the compliance program is not just one step or one singular moment during the implementation, but it's an ongoing process. What it means that it requires to be updated, to be promoted frequently by the organization, by the members of the organization, but also by the stakeholders. Accessibility, it's an important feature of an anti-corruption program. It means that the information should be easily accessible, be published in the website or newsletters of the company. And readability, which means simply easy to understand. The compliance program should be easy to understand and everybody should know what it means, the components, actions of the anti-corruption program. The anti-corruption program should promote a trust-based internal culture. It enables a culture which favors trust over excessive control. It allows the translation of anti-corruption policies into values, norms, and principles. Applicability, of course, it should be applicable to the employees, but also to relevant stakeholders and business partners. Continuity, it means establishing an anti-corruption program, as I mentioned, is an ongoing process. So it's not just one action, one moment you have already done the compliance program and that's it. No, you have to improve it frequently, constantly with the participation of your employees, stakeholders, business partners. Efficiency, it should be employed the company resource adequately. This is very important because if the company is spending too much money in an anti-corruption program, so there are no incentives to keep the actions going. So it's important efficiency and that the resources are employed adequately. Now, let's look now at the key recommendations regarding the anti-corruption program. It's important the close interaction between the senior management, employees, and business partners to guarantee these characteristics when implementing and improving the anti-corruption program. It's important also to establish a clear, visible, and accessible policy prohibiting corruption. Instead of using a unique and universal definition of corruption, it is advisable to adhere to certain manifestation of corruption. For instance, the United Nations Convention Against Corruption doesn't define what corruption means, but it establishes some, at least some kind of activities which are related to corruption in order to exemplify how corruption can take place in the public and in the private sector. It allows the policy to translate the commitment of the zero tolerance of corruption into concrete and understandable elements. Also, the policy should be formally documented, for instance, in the Code of Ethics. It should be formulated in a clear and easy language. This is very important, as I mentioned before, and it should be visible to all parties inside and outside the company. Now we'll move on to the major challenge related to the risk areas, which are more complex when designing a mitigation strategy. I'm going to be focused on three specifically, which are business practice that are illicit but perceived as normal or even required. Secondly, business practice that are legal but can be misused to disguise corruption. And thirdly, business practice that are based on biased decisions. Of course, there are many risks in a company and many corruption risks related to every single process within the company. But I'm going to draw your attention on these three kinds of practices as they are they represent the major challenge for companies as there are not clear rules about how to address them. So first of all, I'm going to refer to business practice that are illicit but perceived as normal or even required, as is the case of facilitation payments. What is a facilitation payment? A facilitation payment is an official and improper payments made to a low-level official to secure or expedite the performance of a routine action to which the payer of the payment is legally entitled. These kind of payments are known as speed or grease payments. as you want to make the thing done as soon as possible. And so you pay to a public official, usually a low-level public official, just to have the things done as soon as possible. So how to mitigate the risk? These payments must be considered as bribes by companies, as they are prohibited by the United Nations Conventions Against Corruption. Companies should establish clear procedures on how to proceed when facing solicitation payments. One thing that is important is to establish a tailored role-based trainings and standardized guidance materials to deal with concrete challenges. There are a guideline which was developed by Global Compact. It will be displayed at the end of the presentation, but it's a guideline developed by the International Chamber of Commerce and Global Compact and Transparency International, which establish a set of recommendations related to how to deal with facilitation payments. It's highly advisable to have clear examples and clear ways about how to proceed in case of we request a facilitation payment, which is common in many jurisdictions. Secondly, I'm going to refer to business practices that are legal but can be misused to dismiss corruption. The last one was the facilitation payment was an illegal practice, but now we are talking about a legal one, which can be used just to disguise corruption. For instance, we have three examples here, which is gifts, hospitality, travel expenses and entertainment, political contributions, charitable contributions, and sponsorships. They are legitimate, that's why they are legal, but there is a potential risk of being misused to disguise a bribe or as a trading in influence. What are the risks related to gifts, hospitality, travel expenses, and entertainment? As they are legal, the risk don't stem from the expenditure itself, but from the situational factors and disproportionality. To raise suspicion of providing undue advantage and also improper attempt to influence the company's counterpart. You can use them just as a trade-off to obtain advantages, business advantages, benefits, or even you can use them, I mean, gifts, hospitality, travel expenses, as a way to commit conflict of interest or just as a tool, an instrument to commit some kind of trading in influence. How to mitigate this risk? There are many ways, but just summarizing them, it's very important to have clear guidelines establishing the boundaries in which such kind of special expenditures can be used. These boundaries are related to the limits of value, expenditures that are considered acceptable, location, the nature of business relationship, characteristics of the counterpart, reimbursements from the counterpart, activities to mitigate the risks, approval procedures, defined responsibilities, and documentation requirements. It's very important to have clear guidelines in order to avoid misuse of gifts, hospitality, travel expenses, and entertainment. And it's also important to set a positive list. What I mean with a positive list, it's important to establish when such practice is allowed for the company, when they can use, instead of establishing restrictions, because the positive language could be more easily being adopted by the employees of the company, and they will be able to understand what is the boundaries of the activity of giving presents, cover travel expenses, etc. The second is special expenditure. It's a very complex one, is the political contributions. Contributions can be in cash or in kind to political parties, party officials, candidates, organizations, or individuals engaged in politics. Companies can promote public policy issues through political advocacy, but they cannot abuse of political contributions to obtain an undue advantage. Why? because there are many risks involved in political contributions. Many national laws consider political contributions as illegal. They can be misused to influence political processes and decision-making for undue advantages. Political contributions may be misused as a subterfuge for a corrupt act. It is very important to bear in mind that sometimes political contributions are used as a way to capture the state and to influence the public policy-making decision process. So it's important, of course, for the companies to be involved in the political activity and participate in political advocacy. But the boundaries should be clearly established, because sometimes the misuse of political contributions can affect dramatically the reputation of the company. The third special expenditure is the charitable contributions and sponsorships. Charitable contributions can be part of the corporate social responsibility of corporations, or be used as a strategy to promote the company's identity, brands, or products. They are donations in cash or kind to support charitable causes in areas such as sport, culture, education, science, etc. What are the risks related, linked, or associated with this kind of contributions? That they can use to generate an undue disadvantage. They can be used as a subterfuge for a corrupt act. So these three kinds of special expenditures, as I mentioned, are completely legal. The risk stems from the fact that they can be misused or can be used to dismiss an act of corruption. So the company should be very, very clear about when they can be used, how they can be used, and that's why, to mitigate such kind of risk related to political contributions and charitable contributions and sponsorship, is important to establish a comprehensive procedure, identify appropriate timing for the contributions, set thresholds for political contributions, maintain accurate books and records, identify conflict of interest of employees with politicians, charitable organizations, and sponsored parties, establish approval procedures, which is very important. Discretion, more discretion, more corruption risk. So it's very important to establish approval procedures with the intervention of many members of the company before be possible to make such kind of contributions. Regular reviews of contributions, disclosure of contributions to enable public scrutiny. This is very important for the reputation of the company. If the company is going to make a political contribution, it's important to make it public, to let the people know that the company is contributing to a specific political campaign, for instance. Understand the counterparts on provision regarding the charitable contributions. The third phenomenon that I'm going to explain you briefly is related to business practice basis on biased decisions. And of course, the main one, the most important one, is conflict of interest. This is the best example of a business practice based on biased decisions. There are many ways in which conflict of interest are classified, but I'm going to be focused on these three easy categories, which are very easy to understand. One is the actual conflicts of interest, which arise when there is a direct conflict between an employee's duties and responsibilities and their personal interest, which influence the performance of those duties. There are potential conflicts of interest, where a conflict of interest may arise in the future due to personal interest conflicting with or influencing required company's duties or responsibilities. And there are perceived conflicts of interest, which includes situations where appear to a reasonable person, that is very important, that an employee's personal interest could improperly or unduly influence the performance of their duties and responsibilities. The source of conflict of interest can be employment of relatives, nepotism, gifts, benefits and hospitality, outside appointments, outside appointments means one singular employee has employees in employment in two different companies, for instance, and they can trade off between the advantage for both of organizations in which the employee works. And parallel internal positions, one person has two different positions within the same organization, and of course, it may have a conflict of interest. For instance, if in one position, that person has to make a decision, and in the other position, he has to control if the decision is properly made or not. Financial investments, suppose that an employee has financial investments in another company, in a counterpart. The engagement of public officials in business, of course, is a high risk of conflict of interest. How to mitigate the conflict of interest? It's very important, as the other cases, to have a clear definition of the problem, establish boundaries about what kind of situations can be considered as a conflict of interest, what kind of situations can be considered as an actual conflict of interest, what situations can be categorized as potential conflict of interest, and what cases can be perceived as conflict of interest. But it's important also to clearly establish who is in charge of addressing the cases of conflict of interest within the organization. It's important the disclosure of possible conflict of interest. It is important to adopt specific measures, such as disclosure of employees' assets and disclosure of assets of the family members of employees who are subject of the rule of asset disclosure. Due diligence is very important in major operational processes and implement procedures to identify conflict of interest. But the most important thing is to address potential conflict of interest. Someone has to be in charge of addressing potential conflict of interest and avoid such situations. And, it's a preventive approach to have the guidelines about how to proceed and who has to make the decision and who decides whether or not a conflict of interest is taking place in a specific situation. And of course, there are, at the end of the slide, you can see there are two options: address potential conflict of interest by avoiding situations that may cause it, or remove the employee facing the conflict of interest from the particular situation. This may be a drastic measure, but it can be included in the anti-corruption program. Okay, just to conclude, it's important to the public reporting. The companies of all sizes should publicly report the company's anti-corruption efforts. This is very important. It is recommendable that companies report on policies and procedures that mitigate corruption risk, listing the areas of potential risk, the procedure and efforts with regards to such policies, and describe where these policies can be found. There are international good practice standards in order to make the public reporting of the measures adopted by the company to mitigate the corruption risks. This is very important not only for the employees, as we mentioned before. The employees should know the main measures and procedures adopted by the company to mitigate the corruption risk, but also it's important to the stakeholders, to the counterparts, to the key partners of the company. And it's really a good practice because they can be replicated by other companies as good practices and good standards for mitigating corruption risks. Thank you so much, Sebastian, and thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fabien, for such a clear presentation, and of course for making such a nice effort to summarize all of those contents that we know a lot and in a short period of time. So before we go to the company examples, I would like to share a quick question with you regarding all the things that you have just mentioned, and especially taking into account that, I mean, you just mentioned a lot of contents that a good anti-corruption program should have and good anti-corruption policies should consider, including, for instance, gifts, including political contributions and so on. But how do we know that those policies are being effective in the company? How do we know in general that our anti-corruption program is good? I mean, how can we define some good indicators for our anti-corruption programs? How can we make that?
Thank you, Sebastian, for your question. As you said, I try to summarize as much as possible a lot of information related to mitigating the corruption risk in companies. But at the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned the key features of an anti-corruption program. And some of these features are related to what I consider are good indicators of good anti-corruption ethics and compliance program. First of all, it's important to have an anti-corruption compliance risk program, which is regularly updated by the management and the board of directors of the company. As I mentioned, an anti-corruption program is an ongoing process, so it's important just to keep working hard on developing the best procedures and measures, for instance, to avoid conflicts of interest. So a good indicator is that the company has a clear anti-corruption compliance risk program to address conflict of interest, special expenditures. This could be one of the good indicators. Another one is a good compliance program should provide whistleblowing channels and follow-up mechanisms for reporting concerns related to corruption. So the channel should be available, should be public, and this is a good indicator of an excellent compliance program. Another one maybe is related to the governance structure of the company, and is related to the role of the compliance officer within the company. It's important that the chief compliance officer have the ability and capability of accomplish with his task. I mean, the governance structure of the company should enable the compliance officers to carry out his responsibilities in a clear and impartial manner and way. So this is also a good indicator. And finally, of course, I think that a good indicator of a good compliance program for a company is the level of engagement in anti-corruption collective actions. I mean, it's very, very important that the companies work not alone, but together with the public sector, with the civil society, and with other partners and other companies to prevent and fight against corruption. So the engagement of the companies in collective actions is a good indicator of that they are doing a good job. Thank you so much, Sebastian.
Thank you, Dr. Espejo, for your answer. I mean, we have another question for you, but in this case, we would like to make that question actually at the end of the panel so that we can actually join with the other panelists and we can make a discussion, all of us, for that question that we have for you, which is actually related to the importance of this program that you, of course, have already given us a lot of information. So thank you again so much, Dr. Fabian, and of course, you will join us shortly in the conversations to follow. Okay, so now we go to the next part of this webinar. We are now about the company examples. And for that, we have invited three wonderful guests. We have their presentations here. I will begin with Maria Roleto Ramos. She's a Chilean lawyer from the Universidad de Chile. She's currently the compliance head for innovative medicine in Novartis, based in Mexico. In this role, she's responsible for the overall compliance strategy for company, as well as for assessing regional and local risks that could affect Novartis' reputation with key stakeholders, and supports to shaping the evolving healthcare environment in Mexico. We also have here with us Dr. Luz Maria Sea. She's a lawyer and commercial law specialist from the Pontificia Universidad Javeriana of Colombia. She holds an LLM from Georgetown University. She's married and has 2 children. Luz Maria has extensive and diverse experience in ethics, compliance, and management. And for more than 20 years, she has led legal teams in Colombia, the Andean region, and Europe in multinational companies. We also have Dr. Arturo De Simone, which is, in this case, he's the Director Legal and Compliance of Porcenardo in Italy. He holds a degree from the University of Bologna and from the City University of London. He was admitted to the bar in Italy in 2003. And he's an associate in national and international law firms based in Bologna, in Rome, and in Milan. He's also lecturer in civil and commercial law at the University of Bologna. And he's, well, as I just mentioned, the Legal and Compliance Director at Porsche Engineering. For the next session, I will ask you to please complement briefly the introduction that I have just mentioned about you all. And after that, I will ask you some questions that we have prepared for you regarding the topic of this session. In this sense, I will begin with Ms. Maria Loreto Ramos. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sebastián. Thank you for the invitation. I think that the bio that you gave was very complete. So only add that I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation to UNODC and Global Compact. I think this is a very interesting topic that we need to tackle in our countries because we need to cultivate in a culture of integrity and accountability, and that can be done through the implementation of anti-bribery policies in our companies. In the case of Novartis, do you want me to start talking about how we implement our policies, right, Sebastián?
Yes, of course. I mean, you can make a brief description about it, and after that, I will ask some questions, some specific questions for you.
Okay. In the case of Novartis, as was mentioned before, the implementation of the policies go through specific steps. First of all, we need to understand our local regulations and also the international regulation that also applies to our businesses. For example, Novartis is a multinational company. We have stock, we're listed in the US Stock Exchange, so FCPA regulations apply. Also, we need to understand whether we have some other extraterritorial legislations that may apply to our business. After that, once we know that legal framework, in a way, we need to understand the application of certain regulations, local regulation to our businesses, depending on the countries that we are doing business, right? So, for example, then it will depend on the business that we are developing. But regarding local regulations, we need to address the anti-corruption regulations that we have in our countries. And also if there are certain local industries code of ethics that may apply. Novartis, as a pharmaceutical company, has a very strong regulation for the commercialization of our products. So we also need to understand and assess in every country how those local regulations apply in terms of health authorization for the commercialization of our products, which are the promotion restrictions that we have in certain countries, local data protection laws as well for our investigation studies, for example. And as it was mentioned, conflict of interest regulations and also restrictions regarding the interactions that we have in our countries with public officials. Those are some examples of relevant regulations that we need to assess prior to implement our internal or anti-corruption policies.
Thank you so much, Ms. Loreto. So you have already mentioned some of the steps that need to be taken and how they can be prioritized in the company. So now I would like to ask you, how can we ensure that these anti-corruption policies are participatory and inclusive?
Okay. Just to let you explain a little bit how it works in Novartis, because it can be of benefit of everyone here. We have kind of an umbrella in terms of regulation of our policies of anti-bribery. We have our code of ethics, we have our anti-bribery policy itself, and also we have a policy regarding conflict of interest and the relation that we have in terms of bribery with third parties. Under that umbrella, we have different policies regarding, or we call them handbooks, regarding the activities that we perform with third parties that are relevant to our business. For example, healthcare providers, patients, government officials, healthcare organizations, etc. Then on those handbooks, we regulate mainly the risky activities that we have. in terms of gifts and hospitality are regulated there, how those transfer of value should be modest, reasonable, infrequent, how we manage those activities also with third parties, and then they comply with also with our internal policies. You know that one of our main risks in the pharma industry is the lack of independence or the undue influence that we can perform with for example, a prescriber physician. And what we really need to tackle is that we guarantee that every patient have the right drug available in the market for their treatment. So all of our policies are considering that main risk that we have, and we try to manage the way that our collaborators are doing business in the field. How do we make them inclusive, and how do we can assure that our collaborators are committed to this framework that we gave them? I think that first of all is to have controls that apply directly to the risk. Let me explain. If we have controls that they are not controlling in a way a certain risk, then what we have is more bureaucracy, and we have policies that are very complicated because we put a lot of things that they need to do. For example, specific approval processes from risk experts. We need to analyze the risk that we want to tackle or mitigate, and then to put controls that are specifically addressing those risks. The other thing is that we need to make our collaborators to understand the why behind the control. If they don't understand why they need to sign a contract, for example, they won't do it, because for them it's just papers and documents and more trouble to do business. But when you make them understand that with that contract, we are in a way, for example, protecting them of conflict of interest, because the third party needs to address and to declare that they don't have any conflict of interest. So that is helping in the way the collaborator and protecting us, not only as a company, but you yourself on the way that you are on your daily work. When you understand that why, it's more easy for the collaborator to follow the processes and to raise their hands when there is something that is not going the right way, and to create that culture of integrity that we need to have in place. On that regard, it's important to understand that the implementation of policies, in a way, is the minimum basis that we need to have. That's probably complying with law, local regulations, industry regulations. But what we need really to have a proper compliance program is to have a culture of integrity in our companies that really gave us the confidence that the people are understanding the risk that they are managing every day, that we have a continuous revision of our risks in terms of understanding the environment, in terms of understanding how business moves, and to make our compliance and policies really adaptable to that reality, so that the collaborators feel confident that they are doing business in the right way. The other thing probably, and it's really important because I heard that it was mentioned regarding trainings. What we have seen is that training just about policies and bringing people together to read the document is really not the way that we need to embed the compliance culture in our companies. What is better to have, for example, customized workshops for each area of the company to analyze the risks that they're facing in the field, and to analyze how we can mitigate those risks, how we can improve our risk assessment regarding those risks that they are facing. When you do those activities in a practical way, people really understand the added value that we are giving them regarding our compliance program. We also need to give them visibility on the deviation of the processes that we have. We monitor our activities, and then we know if we perform those activities according to the approved to the approval process. If there are some deviations, what we need to do is to show them, our collaborators, people that are working outside in the field, show them what are the deviations and the risks regarding those deviations. There were not, for example, a signed contract before the activity, how that creates a new risk for the company. You didn't realize that that third party could have a specific conflict of interest, or for providing us the service that we are hiring. You didn't follow the fair market value methodology, for example, for hiring a relevant third party. How that deviation creates a risk, and how could you manage that risk prior to the activity? So when they know how those controls really protect not only the company, but also our work in a daily basis, they really are more keen to comply with our compliance program.
Thank you so much, Ms. Loreto, for this clear explanation. And it's also very interesting to know your experience, especially taking into account that you come from a very complicated sector, which is the health sector. The pharma business is quite particular, and it has many, many actors interacting with each other. So that makes it even more complicated. So thank you so much for your explanations. I mean, we will have the opportunity to make some other questions, especially from the audience as well, in the next session. So now I will give the word to Ms. Luz Maria Sea. So if you could please, Luz Maria, now take the word, and I don't know if you want to add something else to your presentation, or if you would like me to go straight to the questions, so please let me know.
So I want to say good morning and good afternoon to everybody, and thank you, Sebastian, and everybody in UNODC and Global Compact for this opportunity. I have already learned a lot from my colleagues in this conversation, from Dr. Fabian and from Loreto. I expect the same from Arturo. The questions also from the audience give us signs of how we are moving in this environment. Maybe my only comment is that after 20 plus years of experience, Sebastian, in different companies, health sector, highly regulated, oil and gas, highly regulated, it is very important to have serious regulations, strong authorities, but the only way to really ensure compliance in the private sector is by self-regulation. We really need to believe in this. We really need to own our compliance standards. They have to reflect the values of the company. And we really need to do what we're doing today, collective action. We really need to try to work together to join forces and also acknowledge that we can be integrity influencers. We can all touch everybody around us with this message, and therefore make this something that really makes us a sustainable society. So that's my comment of 20 plus years of experience, Sebastian.
Okay, thank you so much, Luz Maria. I think we all have, I would say, the same appreciation regarding this matter, because it is quite important to acknowledge the role of the private sector. It cannot depend only on external regulation. It has to take action, and it has taken action for quite a long time. So I think that we actually want to know specifically about it. We want to know about the experiences of the companies. We want to know about what they have done in the past and what they are doing right now regarding this topic. So the first question for you today will be, how does a business ensure the laydown policies are transparent and accessible to employees?
Sebastian, I think we acknowledge the need for policies, but we also know that they are sometimes seen as bureaucratic and difficult and hard to understand. So we really need to go beyond these standard templates or policies drafted by external advisors, which are sometimes helpful, of course, but we really need to make policies that are done by people from the company that know the company business, that know the company culture, that know the risks of the company, and that can address our community, our people, the employees, and of course also the stakeholders, the suppliers or the clients in a language that everybody can understand and that really addresses the issues that we have in the business. I mean, something that is too external will probably not be a good fit for your company policy. So it's very important that it's understandable, practical, down to earth, reflecting the reality of the business. It also has to be not only a written policy, it has to be a very lively policy. It has to be seen in day-to-day activities. So it has to be done. I mean, we have formalities and we know that. So a good policy available for everybody in the intranet, for the stakeholders in the web, in maybe sent through newsletters and emails, that works. But you also have to be a little bit more creative and innovative to make it accessible. So you have to, for instance, do short messages in sensitivity and awareness campaigns, do infographics. Sometimes policies are long. Maybe people read it once in their lifetime when it's issued, but then you have to keep it at hand, reachable, easy to access. So an infographic with a summary, with do's and don'ts, a manual. We have a very nice code of conduct, similar to many codes of conduct of other companies. But we also have a manual to the code of conduct with a lot of cases, examples, do's and don'ts, a bit longer, but a bit more useful, down to earth, so people can understand it. So that's one thing. And we can also, I mean, I think we referred a bit earlier to communications tools. Nowadays, we have so many things easy at hand, QR codes. When we go to a meeting, we always put at the end of the slides the QR code for the relevant policies that apply to whatever topic we're dealing, for instance, with the supplier or with the internal community. So I think it's taking into account the real culture of the company, the real business and its risks, and making it not once in a lifetime issuance of the policy, but a pertinent and timely divulgation or publication of what the rules are, so that we can reach really our community.
Thank you so much, Luz Maria. I think that both of the questions that we have prepared for you, they were about the same thing, about how you get the policies kind of interiorized by the people of the company. How do you make them possible to understand? And you have already shared a lot of details of that with us. But I would like to add to those questions something about maybe the roles of the people in the company. I mean, it is not the same for you to kind of approach the director of the company and someone, for instance, in your case, which is a company of oil and gas, some people operating something in the field. So the strategy and the communications program, they also have to adapt to that nature of the company. And I think that you have already made some quite good efforts in that direction. If you could just tell us a little bit more about.
We really have a lot of subcultures within a company. And you're correct. I mean, people that work in an administrative office have a different approach to their day-to-day work than people that work in the field, far away, handling very difficult technological processes. So we need to ensure that we are pertinent, timely, and clear for everybody. So we of course, do focus trainings and focused publication of the rules for everybody to understand. We listen to them to see if we have been clear or not, because the perspective from the headquarters office, it's very, very different to that in the field. And we from the headquarters office need to go there and really ensure that they have understood us. We need to sometimes act as translators also. And what really has been effective for us, Sebastian, is we work very hard on tone from the top. That it's essential. It really has to be there for this to be a trustworthy and reliable program. But we really believe that working in the tone from the middle is also fundamental. The tone from the middle for us has meant training our middle management, which is leaders and managers, 150 people from our organization, because they are the ones really close to the teams, to the operational teams. They are the ones that can immediately, as a risk is taking place, detect it if they have been sensibilized to really understanding when something pertaining money laundering or finance of terrorism or something like that, or corruption, it's eventually taking place. So we have trained profoundly our middle managers in a, not in a technical way, in a legal way, but in a way pertaining to their role in the business. So compliance adapted to what they have to do in their day-to-day, and they are now owners of the compliance program, and they can bring down the message. They can be also multipliers along the organization in the language that the organization is really going to understand, and not in a one day of training that the compliance team is organizing, but when the risk is taking place, timely. So we have started a very, let's say, horizontal way of talking about compliance and compliance policies and anti-corruption in the organization, because our middle managers own the compliance program.
Thank you so much, Luz Maria, for your valuable insights on this matter. I think it is very important to acknowledge a lot of the things that you have just mentioned regarding the importance of, for instance, the tone from the middle. I know it might be difficult, but it is certainly the right way to approach this kind of situation. So again, thank you so much. I mean, this is the first round of questions that we will be sharing with you. Of course, we will be collecting some other questions from the public for the next part of the meeting. But first, we would like to give the word to our next guest, which is Mr. Arturo De Simone. So please, Mr. Arturo, I don't know if you would like to add something else to your introduction, to your presentation, to your work in the company and in the private sector, or if you would like me to get to the questions straight away.
Well, thank you very much, Sebastian, and thank you very much to all the UN organization for this opportunity, and for all the panelists, Luis Maria, Loreto, and Dr. Fabian as well, for the interesting insights. So just to share that at the current time, I am at Nardo in Italy, working full-time for this Porsche engineering company that is an engineering service company that provides its services in the automotive fields, not only to Porsche, that is our mother company, the car manufacturer, but to a lot of customers in the sectors. What do I do for this company is to serve as legal advisor and compliance officer, basically. So in the field of compliance, I take care to establish, monitoring, and maintain a compliance management system that, of course, is designed on the guidelines provided by the mother company, and it's customized according to the region and the business of this company. Basically, our compliance management system is a set of policies and directives. Each of that has got a topic. For staying in today's topic, for the anti-corruption policies, we have a policy with a training material and with a lot of tools that can support also daily the employees in their operation. Luis Maria mentioned some, the handouts, the simply cards, the summary, the executive summary, and are some of these tools that we use to manage and to use in our daily operation in the compliance management system. So that's just to give frame in which we apply the anti-corruption policies at the company, basically.
Thank you, Mr. Arturo. And as we see, we have representatives from different sectors of the economy. We had Ms. Loreto Ramos from the health sector, Ms. Luz Maria from the oil and gas, and now we have you from the automotive sectors and engineering sector, which are, of course, quite different among each of them. So the questions that we prepare for you, I mean, let's begin with this one. And it is, I mean, organizational policies do not exist in a vacuum, and that is a fact. How best can we ensure that those organizational policies on anti-corruption adhere to territorial regulations as well as international rules and standards?
So thank you for these questions. This is a very interesting one topic. I think that, as you properly told, that does not exist in a vacuum. For us, the basis, the starting point is the compliance risk analysis, basically. What is the compliance risk analysis? Is a detailed analysis of the business that the company performs. Basically, it took place in several meetings because it's something that takes time. Several meetings with the management in which we have prepared a draft, a question list, and through those questions, we find out, we better understand the details of the business. Who are our customer, which kind of services we provide, in which way, in which countries, and so on. So basically, this compliance risk analysis provides us with a clear picture of the situation from which risks could arise. Of course, for better adhere to the regulation of the country in which the company has its main office, also some international standards can be very useful. For instance, you know, we have some transparency tool also on the web because Transparency International, also the Corruption Perception Index, the CPI that you can find easily on the web, can provide you a rate of the corruption index of the country in which you operate. And this is a starting point to better investigate the specific regulation, if there is some, for that kind of sector. A quick tool could be, but this is just a personal advice, let's say, is to check if in that country there is an authority that take care of anti-corruption subject. For instance, in Italy, we have this authority, and this authority is also providing a report, an annual report or every 2 years, it depends, about the status of the corruption in that single country. And such report can help us because focus on the most, let's say, on the most common tools for corruption, the trends of the corruption in that countries. We know that also corruption is a kind of behavior that evolves itself. It's not always the same. Just to give an instance, an example, in Italy currently, the most used tools for corruption, according to the last report of the National Authority, are hiring and consultancy. So basically, there are two tools that can enter your company in a very formally safe way. So basically, those two, the compliance risk analysis and some insights for the special, from the special authority of the country can be instruments to make our policy better adherent to the regulation of that country, basically.
Thank you so much, Mr. Desimone. I think this was very precise and clear as well, and also very challenging because, of course, the different regulations may vary a lot between different countries, between different authorities. So it's a whole challenge to try only to understand them. But you just made a very interesting point, and also it might seem like a very simple one, but sometimes it might not be put a lot of focus necessarily. And it is, we just need to understand where we are. We just need to understand our situation, and for that we need to make that risk assessment, that risk analysis that you just mentioned, of course, with a lot of detail. I would not like to go again into that matter. So let's say that we already have those policies, that we have made that risk analysis, and that we have made that risk assessment. How do we kind of solidify those anti-corruption policies within the business? What prevention and reporting mechanism can we use and can we integrate to the operation within the company?
Thank you, Sebastian, for this question as well. As also Luis Maria mentioned, the continuous update of the policy is a key factor for that. So, for instance, at ours, we decided to yearly have a review. Not necessarily we have to change something, but we have decided to sit together with all the colleagues and the people interested and have a check if there is a need for some update. You mentioned two key factors for the success of an anti-corruption policy: the prevention and the reporting. Prevention basically is training for us. Training that is made on presentation, like everybody I think does, and this presentation is we have. For instance, at NADO, we have 3 different presentations according to the people we are presenting to. We have a presentation for a management level, we have a presentation for the middle management level, and we have a presentation for the operative colleagues. Also, we have special anti-corruption training for some group targets of people, of employees. For instance, we have a dealing with authorities training. Why? Because the dealing with the public authorities is one of the fields for our company that we have focused as much risk. So we have decided to support and to provide more tools and instruments to our colleagues that daily deal with the authorities. So the prevention training is also the repetition of the training. Every 2 years, we refresh this training in the way that people knows that it's not something that you make one and then you forget year by year that after 5 years, you are free to do what you want. So it's not like that. And we call it the training concept and the training calendar. And we focus on the kind of employee and the timing for the repetition of the training. More into this presentation, we put at the end of the training a kind of quiz with simple situations that are taken by real cases that we have faced, and we have multiple choice, and all together without rating, without giving an exam or a promotion or whatever, but like a game, we try to focus the right behavior to be followed. Something that, for my perception, is important is to adapt and to create some questions and examples that are really consistent for the people you are talking to, in the way that they can see themselves in that situation. For instance, we know all of us that works for a multinational company knows that the mother companies provides guideline, and then we have to adapt all over the world, basically. I think that this is a core part of our job, to know the context, the territorial context for the people behavior point of view also, and provide them with something that can be received by them. That's for the prevention. Then you mentioned the second factor for a successful anti-corruption policy the reporting. If you say reporting, the first thing I think come in my mind is the whistleblowing system, the whistleblowing channel. That is a reporting channel that allow the company to be informed of some issues that can occur in the inside. And also, for instance, in Europe, now a law is coming up to regulate the whistleblower. And this should allow the people in the company to be more confident to provide information about corruption and to allow company to react about that. So why this is important? Because this ensures the whistleblower, the people that is making the signalization, ensure protection for him. So people do not have to fear some bad consequences if say, oh, the manager is involved in corruption or whatever, or what else. And basically the whistleblower is I think this is the key for a successful reporting channel. However, we have several different, like all the company, I mean, the compliance officer, the office, the ombudspersons in some cases, and but whistleblower is, from my point of view, the more effective one.
Thank you so much, Mr. De Simone. I mean, you have mentioned a lot of important things to consider for actually preventing the programs to be kind of vulnerable with among some other risks, and also for having good anti-corruption programs and strategy. You mentioned also something related to the examples that you need to provide to the people in the company so that they kind of, those examples reflect the reality and are easy to understand. So I think that's a very important thing. I think that Luz Maria also mentioned some ideas regarding that topic. So thank you so much for your intervention again, Mr. De Simone. Now, I would like to go back to Dr. Fabian, if you would like to, because we had a previous question that I think summarizes some of the things that have just been mentioned at this point. And I think it's good to have it right now because it's like a general inquiry on all the things that we have been treating in this webinar. And it is about basically the importance of developing these programs, the importance of developing the anti-corruption ethics and compliance program. We have also received a lot of inputs from the colleagues here, from our guests, and I would like you to kind of summarize some of these experiences and some of this knowledge, please.
Thank you, Sebastian. First of all, thank you so much, Luz Maria, Arturo, and Loreto, for sharing the important goals that have achieved your organizations in the compliance programs and the strategies to fight against corruption and prevent corruption within your organizations. And the importance of a compliance program is related to the reputational risk, how to deal with reputational risks, but also legal risks, but also economic risks for the company. So there are many risks involved when you deal with an anti-corruption program. Not only it goes beyond simply promoting integrity and an ethical behavior within the company, which is very important, of course, but it also is related to the main challenges of the company to try to deal with gray areas. As you could see in the presentation, there are many gray areas. I couldn't approach all of them. I just could mention the most important, the most relevant for the purpose of this presentation. But actually, the main challenge of the company with an anti-corruption program is to establish a clear way to deal with the main challenges about how to deal with corruption, undue payments, and how it's promoted a culture within the organization, an ethical culture, which also contributes to the good and the smooth running of the business at the same time. So the anti-corruption program is relevant for the organization itself. I mean, to enhance the employees' behavior, but also to the organization in regards with their partners, their stakeholders, their reputation in the society and in the economy as well. So an anti-corruption program is very, very important. And as the colleagues in the panel mentioned, it's important to have clear policies easy to understand, easy to apply. Sometimes anti-corruption is an issue which is quite complex. There are a lot of jargon and terminology and theories regarding corruption. I was checking the questions, and there are many interesting questions of our participants, but the main challenge is to make it easy to understand the importance of anti-corruption for the organization and try to translate in an easy language the importance of the measures adopted by the organization. As our colleagues mentioned, to have examples, practical examples about how to deal with situations, real life situations, and it can contribute to the smooth running of the business, but also to the reputation of the organization. And that's why it's one of the 10 principles of the global companies, because it's quite important for any business to behave in a transparent manner.
Thank you so much again, Dr. Fabian, for your valuable insights on this matter. So now we approach the final part of our webinar, and we have selected some questions from the audience. I mean, we of course receive a lot of questions, as Dr. Fabian just mentioned. So it is kind of impossible to get all the questions at this point, but from the team, we just selected some of them regarding some of the topics that we have discussed here. So I will begin with a question regarding small and medium enterprises, small and medium companies. I mean, of course, Ms. Luz Maria, Ms. Loreto, and Ms. Arturo, you all come from quite big companies that have like a lot of trajectory, a lot of reputation in the sector, but we would like to hear from you, and I will ask you to please keep it short here. Maybe one tip or two regarding how can the programs, the anti-corruption programs, be implemented in those companies. So I don't know who of you would like to begin. As I said before, maybe very short aspects that you will recommend for those companies.
Maybe I can go with that, Sebastian. I must say that probably the major failure that we do in companies and what we need to tackle is based on these policies and principles more than in processes and specifics, you know. So what I think it's important is to understand your business, your industry, and then make this risk assessment, but tackle those risks in policies that are principle-based and risk approach-based. See which are the main risks that you have, where you have those, and put controls in those. Probably you cannot manage every risk. We need to have certain risk aversion, you know, so which are the things that you won't compromise with, which are the things that you can work with that. Once you have that definition, it's easier to in a way elaborate those procedures, but based on general things that everyone can understand and apply to their business, to their daily job.
Thank you so much, Loreto. Ms. Luz Maria, please.
Yes, I would add maybe, Sebastian, that even for small and medium companies, this is totally doable. Compliance, of course, has technical aspects that we have to acknowledge because it's also mandatory by law, but at the end, it's really only doing things right, doing things correctly. So that's important also and doable in a small company. What you need to know is that everybody has to be aligned. It's a principle-based way of handling the business. It has to reflect the values of the company and of the people of the company. At the end, compliance is reflecting your own values in your work, in your day-to-day work. So I think also Global Compact, UNODC, Alliance for Integrity, many other entities supply best practices that small companies can use to start establishing their own compliance system, their policies in a simple and easy way that it's applicable for them to the size of their business. But at the end, it's doing things correctly.
Thank you very much, Luz Maria. And you just mentioned something very important, and it is the ability for small and medium enterprises or companies to learn from other companies, to learn from those testimonials that, for instance, in this occasion, you have generally shared with us. So thank you so much for that. Mr. De Simone, would you like to add something to this question?
Very briefly, I focused for this on the content of the training material. because the policy is basically a paper with 7, 8, 10 pages that nobody will read. And that's it. What will remain is the content of the slides that you show directly to the persons. So I focus to have those slides very clear with some signs also, something that can take the attention. And also at the end of the training to deliver this handout, this plastify do's and don'ts that they can easily store on the desk or keep everywhere they want, and have a quick, reliable, clear support. Oh, the supplier offered me such invitation. May I accept? Let's have a check. Or just have the number to call for the help. So easy and affordable tools and solutions from my side. Thank you.
Great, Mr. De Simone. So the next question, and also I will ask you to give very short interventions as it was the case here. And it is, I mean, the people were interested in how to deal with facilitation payments. That actually was something that Fabian mentioned in the intervention. So I would like to know your views on this matter very briefly. So any of you who would like to begin?
For instance, we have a very strict policy for the dealing with authorities. Authorities, no gift, no payments, no exchange, no kind of any relation from this point of view of exchange with the authorities. Even to provide a calendar is needed an approval from the top management and the top management. So it's a very clear rule, no payments to the authorities at all. And special training for those people that used to interact with the authorities.
Very clear, Mr. De Simone.
Yes, in Frontera, facilitation payments are clearly understood as bribery. It doesn't matter if the recipient is a, let's say, not very high official, but it's still a public officer. And it doesn't matter if the gift or the payment is small. It's an undue payment. So we have to be very clear with that. As Arturo mentioned, there could be justifiable things like a calendar, an end of the year calendar, or a picture book of a cultural value at Christmas, because it's a culturally acceptable event. And it's promotional with the name of the company. It has really nominal value. Something like that, of course, it's okay. I mean, we also want to be grateful for a good relationship, but never a facilitation payment.
That was quite clear, Mildred Maria. Thank you so much. Loreto, please.
Yes, for us it's also prohibited. In these terms, I think that we're talking about cultural acknowledgements in those cases, depending on the country and the market, etc. But if we're talking on facilitation payments, they are prohibited. And I think that this is the importance of having controls in terms of financials. We need to have strong financial controls and accounting procedures to monitor that kind of expenditure that we have in the company, and to prevent fraudulent activities, and to have accurate, transparent reporting.
Thank you, Ms. Loreto. And please, Dr. Fabian.
Thank you, Sebastian. I think that it's important to avoid a subjective approach of facilitation and payments, because there are companies that operate in many countries, many different countries, and of course, those countries with different cultures, business cultures. But if you have a global standard in your compliance program in which facilitation payments, as is the case of the companies that represent our colleagues, are avoided and are taken as bribery, as illegal. So in those countries where facilitation of payments is not illegal, the company can set a high standard in which all the members of the company and all the key partners of the company should avoid such kind of payments. So the recommendation is to avoid them and to keep them as a bribery and as an illegal payment. In any case, disregarding the culture of the country or the different approach of gifts or travel expenditures or any other kind of special expenditure that I mentioned in the presentation. So it's important to avoid a subjective especially in the case of companies operating in different jurisdictions.
Thank you, Dr. Fabian. I think it's quite interesting, especially because, I mean, even if you, even if one doesn't acknowledge it right now, most of the regulations on this matter on facilitation payments, it's not like very old. It is kind of relatively recent. So it is very important to acknowledge how it differs from country to country. So thank you so much for your interventions. So now that we approach the end of this session, I would like to just make a final question very quickly, and it is about some kind of a disjunction or distinction between what has to be done in terms of legal requirement versus what would make sense to create to promote a culture of integrity inside the company. Because sometimes, I mean, of course, you have to comply with the law, you have to comply with the requirements, but that is not always necessarily the same as to promote an ethical culture, because you can go actually beyond that. So if I could just have some quick comments from you on this question, again, who would like to begin? Luz Maria, please.
Sebastian, I think, of course, the legal aspects are a minimum. And they always need to be followed. But the other is really the sustainability of the company. Going beyond and really believing in a culture of integrity, it's really what ensures that you're going to be successful in a sustainable and correct way, taking into account, of course, the company, but also the stakeholders, respecting those around you and ensuring that you will have business for the long run. I think it really has to be believed in, and it has to be really beyond that. It has to be a culture of integrity.
Perfect, Maria. Thank you. Maybe Mr. Loreto.
Yeah, I completely agree with Luz Maria. And it's not only to have procedures. That's, as we said, is the minimum standard. What we need is to create an environment of psychological safety environment for people to raise their hands when there is something not going in the right way. We need to tackle the qualifications processes in terms of human resources that we have inside our companies to also add ethical measures to manage our people. We need to make them understand from the top leaders that we can lose business in a way, but we will never comply in ethical issues. Those are messages that creates an environment that makes the company sustainable, as we said, that made our people keen to continue working in ethical companies. It's a win-win, you know, situation, not only for the company, the collaborators, and the society.
Thank you so much, Ms. Loreto. Mr. De Simone, please.
Yes, very briefly. Integrity is really a key point at our company, and it is also part of a worldwide program. Just to give a concrete example, I have myself here a box that we provide to all the companies, the people, that is Together for Integrity. And there are many slides, many fields. Of course, there is also anti-corruption, but environmental, people, and so on. To sensibilize and emphasize this ground for compliance. And integrity is one of the key on the ground.
Thank you so much, Mr. De Simone, and also very interesting, all those files that you share with the collaborators and employees of the company. Finally, Mr. Espejo, would you like to add something to this question?
No, Sebastian, simply say that I'm happy for the interest, the questions, and the opinions of the panelists, because they have provided us a lot of good examples about how to adopt measures to fight against corruption, to prevent corruption, but also they have mentioned that it's not impossible for a small or medium company enterprise to adopt such measures. Language is important to familiarize the organization with the culture of ethics and integrity. But also, it's relevant to mention that they note that it's not only to accomplish with the basic legal standards, but it's the challenge is to go beyond the legal standard But also, of course, it's important to bear in mind the legal restrictions, and because companies are punished if they don't accomplish with the law. But that's not the goal of the compliance program. The goal is to reach the best possible standard of ethic, behavior, and integrity in the organization, and also to promote such high standards in other jurisdictions, as I mentioned, where there are not such kind of high level of commitment regarding such topics like transparency, integrity, and anti-corruption measures. So the contribution of a company to other legal systems could be very important from this perspective. That's it.
Thank you so much, Fabian. Thank you, Luz Maria, Loreto, Arturo, Simone. I think, and we all think, and I think we all agree that it has been a great presentation from you all, a great discussion from your practices and for real life examples. We just wanted to share with you all and with all the audience some resources that we have prepared from the UNODC and from the UN Global Compact regarding these topics, regarding all the anti-corruption programs, regarding bribery, regarding principles for the fight against corruption, and of course for business integrity in general terms. You have these resources here. Of course, we will also provide some of them, and basically all of them are online. We also mentioned the business integrity portal, which is actually quite a good example of a website where you can find multiple resources on this matter. We will also announce some of the other events, all the webinar sessions that we have right now. So the next steps and the next sessions that we are preparing are in October and in November regarding gender dimensions of business integrity, also an interesting topic, and the implementation of the anti-corruption programs. Remember, we have just mentioned that we need to assess the risk, we need to mitigate those risks, but how do we implement those anti-corruption programs, like very practically, very specifically? So that's basically some of the things that we have just for you today. Thank you again to all the panelists. Thank you, Fabian Espejo. We will also appreciate a lot if you could just fill this satisfaction survey, because we can improve our presentations, we can improve our webinars in the future. So yes, I mean, we will be really grateful if you could actually help us with this. So from the United Nations Global Compact, from United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, we really appreciate your participation today. We really appreciate all your inputs, not only for the panel and for the whole session. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.